Well, hey there, everyone. It's Mrs. Acero, and I am here to teach your class how to revise your narrative writing. This is part 2, so you will need a rough draft of a narrative. If you don't already have one, I do have a free YouTube lesson on this, narrative writing part 1, where I will guide you through writing your rough draft. Before we begin, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Mrs. Acero, and I have an online teaching store called All-in-One Middle School. I was a teacher for 34 years. Teaching language arts was and is my passion. The goal of this lesson is to make revisions to an original narrative. Narrative writing is a whole process, so be sure to also look for the first video called Narrative Writing Part 1, which I already mentioned. This presentation, along with guided notes, is available to print in my TPT store. I will leave the link in the video description. If you're using guided notes, you should fill them in when you see this icon. If you're not using the guided notes, that's okay. Just be sure to have some paper or a computer so you can write while you're watching. If your teacher lets you work with a partner, you will turn and talk in certain portions. I hope you find this lesson helpful. Let's dive in. So before we start, I always give you a mentor text. It's always good to have a mentor text to refer to when learning new skills. For this lesson, we will examine the short story Stray by Cynthia Rylant. Your teacher may prefer that you use a different mentor text. If so, when you take notes, just substitute what your teacher tells you to use. So you're going to pause this video now and you're going to click on Stray. It's about 6 minutes long. While you're watching, think about what makes the story compelling. Look at dialogue, internal monologue, figurative language, and things like that. The link is in the video description. Just so that you know, there are plenty of free PDF links available if you search it online if you would rather have a printed copy. We'll discuss the story a bit later, so go ahead and pause my video and watch Stray. Okay, we are going from rough draft to final copy today. There is no doubt that you have read and enjoyed stories and movies. These are narratives because they tell a story. Aside from being fun to do, hopefully, writing narratives is something that you will need to do at least a few times in your academic career. Once you have a rough draft of a story, you'll want to add some extra elements to make it even better. You'll need your rough draft of a story to do this lesson. Remember, you can always go back to the first video lesson if you need to. Some of the elements we're going to look at today are going to be dialogue, internal monologue, figurative language, and more. So we're going from rough draft to revisions, and that will give us a stronger narrative. So improving your narrative, let's get on board here. When you wrote your rough draft, you were focused on all of the plot elements. Now you will work to improve your story. Think of revision like tuning a musical instrument. You keep making small adjustments until everything sounds right. Today's goal is to make improvements to your rough draft. You will add elements to elevate the level of your writing and make it more engaging to your reader. So if you look here, we have our first guided notes icon. Okay, so if you're using them, now's the time to start filling them in. So revision ideas. You know, there is so much you can do to make revisions, and that's something that you'll always want to do, but we need a starting point. So as we go through the lesson today, the elements we're going to work on are a strong lead, which means we want to grab the reader's attention right from the start. Dialogue, when characters are speaking to one another. Internal monologue, what a character is thinking. Figurative language, things like similes, metaphor, sensory images, hyperbole, things like that. Show, don't tell, is when you describe using details rather than stating it outright. Symbolism, using objects that have deeper meaning than just being an object. And strong ending, where you'll leave the reader with a satisfying ending. We're going to go through each of these one at a time. But first, I want you to think about the story Stray by Cynthia Rylant. You're going to turn and talk to your partner about these speaking points, and you'll fill in your guided notes. So these are the elements that we just talked about: strong lead, dialogue, internal monologue, figurative language, show, don't tell, symbolism, and a strong ending. You're going to describe briefly or use an example. So you'll do that for the story Stray. So you'll turn and talk to your partner, and you'll say something like, when the writer started the story, she started by describing the setting, or whatever the author did. Okay, you're reflecting on Stray right now. And then why you gave it that rating. Okay, so maybe you thought that the lead was okay, but it could have been a little bit more exciting. So maybe you want to give it a 7. And maybe you think that because you didn't think there was enough description. So try to be as specific as you can. Pause my video and turn and talk. Okay, let's get into step 1, which is a strong lead. A lead is how you get a reader interested in your story. There are many different ways to start a story, but here are some to get you started. Dialogue, when characters are speaking to each other. Sensory images describe what is happening by stating what the character sees, hears, touches, tastes, and smells. An exciting action. You could start with a compelling action by one of the characters, or by an action occurring around a character. You could describe the setting. You could use descriptive words to show where the story takes place. And you could also hint at the ending, where you give a taste of the conclusion of the story. So now you're going to try it. You're going to turn and talk with your partner. You'll try each of the lead styles for your narrative, not for Stray. That's what I'll do. Okay, from here on out, you'll be working on your narrative, but I'll be modeling through our mentor text Stray. Okay, you're going to record it in your guided notes, and then you'll select your favorite. I did an example from Stray for each. Okay, so for dialogue, this is not what the author did. This was an idea I had. The author could have started with the dialogue, "Come here, sweetie, don't be afraid." And I'm thinking of Doris kind of coaxing on the little stray dog. Sensory images. Snow glistened all around and a cold breeze hit Doris's face. Okay, you don't have to use all 5 senses when you do that. Exciting action. Out of nowhere it appeared and caught everyone by surprise. Right, so that's kind of intriguing. I was kind of referring to the dog, by the way. You could describe the setting. The house was covered with a rim of icicles while snow filled the long driveway. A hint at the ending. Who would think that happiness could be found in a 4-legged, scraggly mutt? Okay, so pause my video. You're going to go into your guided notes if you have them, but you will try one of these different styles of leads, just like I did, but you'll do it for your narrative. So pause my video and turn and talk. Okay, step 2 is to add some dialogue. Dialogue is so important in stories because it moves the plot along. Here are some places to try dialogue. Obviously at the beginning, at the inciting incident, that's where the problem occurs. At the climax, which is the point of highest tension when things change for the main character. And at the resolution, when the story is over and the problem has been solved. Now you can use dialogue anywhere. I just wanted to give you maybe some ideas that you might not have thought of. So now you're going to try it. Turn and talk with your partner. Try adding dialogue for these points in your narrative. Record in your guided notes, and here's an example from Stray. So remember, I'm doing Stray. you're doing your narrative. At the beginning, again, this is not what the author did. This was just my idea. Doris, are you almost finished shoveling the snow? Inciting incident. Mom, Dad, come quick. You have to see this. At the climax, thank you so much for this, Dad. That was when, I would say the climax is when the father admits that he's going to let her keep the dog. The resolution, come here, sweetie, you found your forever home. Pause my video and turn and talk and add dialogue to your narrative. Okay, step 3 is internal monologue. That tells us what a character is thinking. This can be done in first person, meaning the character is telling the story, or in third person, when a narrator is telling the story. You can try internal monologue in the same places as the dialogue: the beginning, the inciting incident, the climax, and the resolution. Now try it. Turn and talk to your partner and try adding internal monologue for these points in your narrative. You'll record it in your guided notes, and here's my example. By the way, you don't use quotation marks for internal monologue. You don't even need to write it in italics. You can write it in italics if it's like a really important thought, but just write it as you would any part of the story. Okay, so for the beginning of Stray, I wrote, why am I stuck shoveling snow? The inciting incident, this can't be happening. Climax, I'll never let this little dog down. Resolution, there is nothing that can top this day. So I just wrote what I thought Doris could be thinking. Pause my video and turn and talk and add some internal monologue to your narrative. Okay, step 4 is figurative language. This is going to help you embellish your story and make it more sophisticated. Okay, here are some types of figurative language to consider. A simile, when you compare two unlike objects using like or as. Metaphor, when you compare two unlike objects using is, was, are, and am. So you don't use like and you don't use as. Personification, giving an object human-like characteristics. And hyperbole, over-exaggerating for effect. All right, turn and talk. You're going to add your figurative language to your narrative. Record in your guided notes, and here's my example. My simile, the dog was shaking like a leaf. Metaphor, the dog was a warm ember, warming her heart at once. Personification, the snow tucked the world in a soft white blanket. Okay, so I gave the object of snow a human-like quality. Hyperbole, that's your exaggeration. Doris felt like her whole world had crumbled in an instant. Pause my video and turn and talk and add in your figurative language for your narrative. Okay, step 5, show, don't tell. That means that you describe what happens with thoughts and actions rather than just stating it outright. So, for example, instead of saying, she was sad, you would say, tears began to stream down her face. Okay? So, good times to use it when a character has a strong emotion, when you're describing a character trait, when you're talking about a relationship between characters, when you're setting the mood of the story, or when there is tension and conflict. Okay, so you're going to find two places in your narrative where you told something. Then describe by showing instead. You're going to record it in your guided notes. Here's the example that I did. The tell example, and this was actually in the story. The author wrote, she was trying not to cry. And instead of doing that, I wanted to show it. And I wrote, this was my idea, she clenched her jaw and blinked rapidly. Pause my video and add some show, not tell, to your story. Okay, step 6. This is a good one. Symbolism. This is when an object represents a bigger concept. Symbols can be colors, like red being power. Objects, like a swing, could mean change. Seasons, sometimes winter indicates death in a story. The possibilities are endless. Here are some good places to consider symbolism. When there's conflict, so for example, a storm could symbolize inner turmoil or an approaching crisis. In a character's development, an example, a character's broken watch may symbolize their inability to let go of the past. Objects, a locked door might symbolize a secret that the protagonist must uncover. And dialogue, a character repeatedly referring to paths or crossroads might symbolize indecision or change. So now you're going to turn and talk and try it. Find 2 places in your narrative where you can add symbolism. Look for objects, weather, colors, and things like that. If you're finding that your narrative doesn't have any object or weather or colors or things that can be symbolism, you might need to add that first, okay? An example from Stray is here. The door to the kitchen was an object that was mentioned a couple of times in the story, and the possible meaning, it could represent the way to the official welcoming of the family, because if you remember, the dog was always kind of laying on the basement steps, listening in on the kitchen to the conversations. So I thought it could symbolize that. So pause and turn and talk and add some symbolism into your narrative. Okay, step 7, strong ending. Having a powerful ending is so important in any story. Some believe it's the most important component of a successful narrative. There are many ways to do it, but here are some ideas. End with some last words from the main character. I believe in Stray they ended with last words from the father. You could end with a question, with a big idea, like a lesson learned. Or you can do what's called the full circle, where you're going to go back to something that happened earlier on and bring a closure. You'll try it now. Try each of the ending styles for your narrative and record them. Here's what I came up with. For last words, Mom and Dad, you won't regret this. That would obviously be Doris talking. A question, how did I get so lucky? A big idea. A house just isn't a home without a dog. Full circle. Mom and Dad decided to open their hearts to the idea of sharing what they had with a new furry family member. Because as you remember at the beginning, they were not too happy about having a dog in their home. So pause my video and turn and talk and work on your ending. Your last step now is to edit and publish. So this is going to take a little time. At this point, you will go back to your original narrative and add in your favorites that we worked on. You do not have to force everything you did in this lesson into your narrative. Only put in what feels natural and improves the narrative overall. So the idea was to get a lot of ideas. Some of them you would use, but you wouldn't use every single one. Then you'll want to edit for spelling, grammar, punctuation, and things like that. Pay close attention to punctuating dialogue. And now you're ready to publish. And that is a wrap. Be sure to tune back in for more Teach My Class episodes. You can also check out First Chapter Friday on my YouTube channel, where I read the first chapters of my favorite middle school novels. Hope to see you soon.